Hey, welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
And it's been a couple weeks, Ryan.
It has. And this is our fourth apology of the summer.
But life comes at you fast.
Yeah. So we've had a handful of camps, especially one high school camp last week, Monday through Thursday.
Feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long
ago. It feels
ago.
like a year ago at this point. And then I got sick or had allergies or something. I don't even remember.
Well, you were gone, and then you bought a house, and then you got sick.
Oh, yeah, I bought a house.
And all that stuff. So, like, things have been... And then the whole staff was gone, basically, for like 4 days.
Yep.
And we hiked and got wet and ate lots of really good food that your wife made.
Yes.
And
incredible.
It was a great trip, but I think I also haven't preached for the last 2 weeks. So, thank you, John, for doing that.
A lot of people wonder about our camps. And I know, like, for the church I grew up at, we always attended camps. We didn't put on camps. The closest thing we did was, like, VBS or something like that. Yep. Or like the Christmas program that's like a play for children. Mm-hmm. And it's really about the children performing for the parents and not the children learning.
Yep.
Anyway, but what we do for camps is really different.
It is.
So we have 2 camps every year.
Especially during the summer.
Yeah. So we have 2 camps every year in the summer. We have a high school camp. I grew up going to like a church camp.
Yep.
And we would attend with 6 or 10 other churches and whatever. Our church camp for high schoolers is like we rent out a big Airbnb or do something like that for about a week. And we go out and do a bunch of nature-y stuff. We go to pretty places and hike 1 or 2 days, whatever week it is. I keep saying wherever or whatever because sometimes we go to Colorado, sometimes we go to Arkansas like we did this year. And maybe we'll go to different places in the future, but those are the 2 back and forth between now.
And I know you and Sharon have been here for 3 years, 4 years?
3 and a half.
3.5, okay. And so kind of how this all started was probably about 12 years ago. We just... I was doing youth ministry, and
because Trevor was the youth pastor before John.
And John obviously does everything now. I was.
This is John Flowers, not John Coward.
And I was a part of this last week's camp because he was on sabbatical and had just come back, and I wanted to be able to let him not have to come back and immediately run and teach and do everything. So I just taught. That's all I did. I did go on the hikes and stuff, but I wasn't in charge of anything else. But when we originally made the jump, because when I came to Kingsway, in 2009? Anyway.
How long have you been here? You said that number more recently.
15 years in August here. So
then like 9, 10, late 9.
Late 9. That first summer, I actually did all the events that the previous youth pastor had set up. And there was concerts, and we went to Maranatha Bible Camp and CIYs, and we did moves. And, all the, I would say for this area, the traditional Christian church kind of attempt at camp. And what I just found, and this isn't a super knock on anything, it's just what we wanted to create as an environment and what we saw that the kids or the students needed was not a bunch of stuff to do constantly and a bunch of information, but what we wanted time to connect with the kids, and we wanted space for them to be like students and kids again. And so it ended up allowing us to make our own schedules, be able to teach what we wanted to teach, when we wanted to teach it, how long we wanted to teach it. It really just came from a heart of wanting to have more time with the kids and a little less busyness.
It's a lot more relational. I'll say this because I grew up in the we attend church camp mode. There's pros and cons to both. The big pro for going to camps is you don't have to be good at creating a camp for your kids to have usually a pretty good camp.
Yep.
Usually, like if it's at a church camp, there's deans. So it's like we're creating this via committee rather than just one guy's ideas or whatever. And so that can kind of slow things down or like keep it a lot more even-handed and general and whatever. But so the nice thing is if you are a youth minister or something like that, you don't have to come up with camp.
Oh, it's
every
so much
year.
less work when you go to
So
like
much
a-
easier.
So much less work.
And it can still be really impactful for kids.
It can.
What I love about camps like this, and our kids' camp is the same way, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But what I love about this is I remember going to camp as a kid, middle school camp, high school camp, and then coming back to my church and being like, I wish worship was like that camp. I wish our speakers were like that camp. And then even worse, not worse, but like even more strongly, we'd go to CIY, which is instead of 100, 150 kids, it is 3,000 plus kids.
Yep.
And a huge band and a stadium and whatever. And then you go home and you're like, I wish worship was like camp. And it's like, no, your 50-year-old, like hard to control their vibrato worship leader, no matter how much they love the Lord, will never sound like that professional touring band. That's what I love about the way we do camps is it's so centered on our staff members and our youth sponsors and volunteers that when you come back, you have all those people from camp at church.
Yep.
There's pros and cons to each, but like we just have awesome people at our church.
It really
so much
is.
so that we can put on our own camp and it isn't garbage or
No,
fiery
and I
poo-poo.
had multiple parents come up to me and tell me that their high school students had the best time they've ever had at a camp. And that's not like a pat on the back or whatever. I mean, we can say kudos. I do feel like we do a good job at camps. But that's because we felt like what we can do is actually create camps that kids feel like the center of it, but it's also not it's not a show. It's not us trying to emotionally manipulate them. And it's not something that we're trying to sell them. We're inviting them in. We're giving them opportunities to grow, to learn, but then also to participate and like be a part of something that challenges them.
It's just very relational, more than like, I feel like administrational is the opposite. It's like the camps I grew up going to. There's small group time, but it's like you have 45 minutes. You better get it done. Then we're gonna ring a bell and you're gonna scream and eat candy and whatever. And like we have a little bit of that, but it's not ring a bell and we're on a hard schedule and all the groups have to stop and whatever. We get to do whatever we want. And
it really creates an awesome
if kids are
environment.
having great discussions about the faith, we keep doing that and push bedtime back. Like, we have the freedom to do that. And that's been the really cool thing.
Well, and what I love too is you get to decide the topics. The schedule.
What do our kids need?
Yeah, and the schedule can change if, for example, it's raining and we need to push it back a little bit, or things are like we have complete autonomy to allow our group to have the best time according to what we feel like we need in the moment. And that's just not, the flexibility is just not there with larger camps. And then on top of that, I think as a youth pastor, at least what I used to run into was the topics and the things that they wanted to discuss. Sometimes I'd already discussed them, or like we'd already covered it, or like, I'm like,
you wouldn't know in time.
Yeah.
And it'd be like,
it's
we talked about that this whole semester.
Exactly. And then it ended up being like, you're trying to stay connected and you're trying to act like this is what is important. And it really did sometimes feel like it was a hand. So why I love this particular camp is we've been doing this. I think this is my 10th time going down there to hike. I think it's like my 7th or 8th high school camp, but I've gone down there with guys groups and small groups. We go down to Ponca, Arkansas. And originally when we did this, it was tent camping, no showers. I took all the phones away from the students. And
we've evolved.
We washed ourselves in the river. I mean, like it was called Stripped Away. John, I think, has definitely modernized it in a very healthy way. You guys ran into VRBOs. You actually had a little civic center that they had.
Yeah.
That had like a basketball court and a full kitchen.
We brought like 25, 30 something people. I don't remember how many.
Yeah, leaders and students, 2 vans full, and then a bunch of leaders that came and left when they had to. And so we hiked for 3 days. We hiked for 2 days and then canoed for another. And we have a really hard hike on the second day.
So hard.
It's 6 hours. Like
harder than you would think
8
a
miles.
high school church ministry should go.
It definitely
by
pushes the limits. If you want to look it up, it's called Indian Creek, up to the Eye of the Needle, in Ponca. But we also have some fun things. Like we did Lost Valley, which is a very fun hike. It's very short, very rewarding. And then we canoed the last day.
Yeah.
That was stinking awesome.
Yeah.
Best
just
weather.
Stop a bunch of times down the river and just like
jump off stuff,
hang out, eat stuff, jump off stuff, skip rocks.
Try to make a rope swing.
Yeah, it's what I love about it is compared to the other camps where it's like every 45 minutes we're doing something new. This is like we have 2 sessions a day. That's just like when we gather for worship and to learn from the Bible.
And the acoustics
or whatever.
in that place was pretty awesome.
They were
too.
great. We have one of those kind of bookending each day, so 2 a day, and then meals, and then one big physical activity
that we're all
like
together
every day,
and we're all together, which is, and it it really leaves you feeling like you're connected to the people that went. You accomplished something that you felt really good about, and then you were challenged to learn.
Yeah.
And this year we picked the theme of perseverance through the book of James. Admittedly, I don't know how well I covered the book of James. However, I feel like I covered some of the verses pretty well.
like 5.
Like 5. But the theme, I guess,
we did read through a lot of the book.
We did. And there's the problem with James is it's very specific situations, and it can be very studious to learn exactly the cultural implications of
I grew
each
up
thing.
thinking, oh, this is a super practical book for everybody. And then you read the first line or the first couple lines, and it's like,
To the
this
12
is
tribes.
very specifically to Jews who have followed Jesus the Messiah.
Yep. And they're coming out of legalism, and they're going into this grace-filled theology while also trying to integrate other non-Jewish people into this. And it's like uber complicated.
So it's some of it's like sort of clear, and some of it is very strongly worded because of the background that people are in. Where when you read from Paul or from whoever wrote Hebrews or some of the other people on the same topic, it's a lot less harsh.
Yep.
But it has the same general direction, and you're like, why is this guy different? That's why.
That's why, because he's writing. He's basically the lead pastor of the church in Jerusalem, and he's also Jesus's brother. And a lot of the implications is not like we're not living through our ideas of like we're earning salvation. He's just basically like, don't live in just grace, you dorks. Like persevere, try to grow, like mature, like don't stay where you're at, like move forward. And I think the tone of the book, of course, is perseverance, but it's also during persecution. So like they're persevering because they're getting pushback. It's not easy. Things are not going well. It's challenging to grow. It's challenging to learn, and kind of the whole thought process. If you want to go and read 1 James 2-4, is basically like
James 1, 2,
James 1-2-4. The verses. It's this idea of like consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many times, for we know that this persecution is actually leading to growth in your faith. And in fact, if you let perseverance finish its work, you'll be complete, not lacking anything.
Yeah.
You'll become mature. And so I took those verses and I basically just attached them to the concept of like, don't expect perseverance to be something that you push through once in your life, but actually treat it more like a characteristic or a tool in your tool belt. Recognize that it's something that you're going to need through your whole life and through your whole faith. And then we did like this really hard hike in the center. And so it's like the whole time, we're like, oh my God.
This is what the lesson's for. This like, one day.
For right now. And then we had to build a rope swing at the very end when I was exhausted. My arm hurt. And when we got it, I was like,
it took like 30 minutes.
I can't stop. Like I have to try, I have to finish this stupid thing. But it was fun to be able to look some of the students in the eyes that I've known, since they were little kids, and I've been around them good chunk of them for their entire lives. Matthew Hodson being like one of them that like I known him since he was born, so like he's on this trip, and it's just it was a really fun time. It felt very timely to be able to teach high school kids like, faith is not a works-based thing, but maturity and growth takes work.
Yeah.
It's like salvation is not coming from your works, but growth and maturity and like moving forward in your life does take work. And so, yes, we live by grace, but we grow through perseverance. Like we have to work at it.
Grace is that Jesus isn't giving up on opportunities to help us grow.
Yep.
And abandoning us. But we were just talking about this today because we're about to preach on Matthew 22 something, 1 through 22, and talking about the relationship between grace and our works.
Yep.
And there are certain Christians throughout time who have said, like, it's all grace. Your works don't even matter. Actually, Jesus chose you to be saved before the foundation of the world. So there's nothing you can do to throw that off. And that doesn't seem to match the New Testament.
No.
There seem to be a lot of times and spaces in all that text, in all the different books and different authors, that they're like, hey, stay strong in the faith or else. Like, don't, Revelation 2 and 3, the letters to the 7 churches.
Don't let your lamp stand.
Don't keep fighting if you are victorious, as in you keep your head about you in the faith for whatever time you have left. Then the reward, yada, yada, yada.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think I was listening to a podcast, and this Jesuit priest was quoted, and I can't remember his name, and I would butcher it even if I tried. He was Italian, I'm pretty sure. But he said that every sin is not God's perception of you changing. It's your perception of how God perceives you. And so when you sin, it's not that all of a sudden God hates you and he doesn't want you to be around anymore, and he doesn't think you're worthy of love or grace. It's that you perceive God as changing. Yeah. Because you know that you're unworthy, and so you perceive him as not wanting you around anymore. And so then God is doing this dance of trying to reveal his grace and love while you simultaneously know deep down you're probably not worthy of it. And so it's this weird, trying to earn it while knowing you're not, while he's trying to give it before you deserve it.
Yeah. We're probably going to talk about this Matthew passage next week. But it's a really good example of that, where it's like, you've been invited to this wedding feast not because of anything you've done or earned. But then one guy doesn't wear the wedding clothes that should have been given to him, and the feast thrower throws him out.
Yep.
And I was so confused and befuddled the first time I read that. But the more I read it, I was like, oh, he was given a free gift. He just chose to reject and shame it.
Yeah. And
it's so easy to take the clothes that somebody is trying to give you for this wedding. It's a whole culture we don't understand very easily on naturally from our culture. But
well, and it basically just be like you get something from somebody as a gift, and you just discount it. You just don't want it.
Thrift it immediately.
You throw it away. You don't wear it. You don't use it. And that's part of the reason why I love our camp so much is because of the discussions that we get into. End up having rubber hitting the road. I ran into one of the kids that was on the trip at the gym 2 days later, and he quoted me 2 of the things that I talked about. And I remember I was just like, oh, you were listening. I was like, oh, you paid attention. Because what we talked about was perseverance needs consistency. There's no way to grow and mature in any area without consistency. And a lot of times we think of perseverance as a momentary thing, I just got to push through this moment. It's no, perseverance is actually doing the right thing or doing the healthy thing over and over and over again.
There's that momentary perseverance. I'm going to keep trying to loosen this bolt until it loosens, or this pickle jar lid. But then there's the perseverance event by event over the course of your life. I'm going to open hard to open pickle jars every day.
Yep.
That's the kind that people want to give up on. They do it once, they feel proud.
Absolutely. And
yay me.
We stop perseverance from becoming a trait when we don't make it consistent. It becomes something that identifies with us every now and then, but it's not an overwhelming quality of who we are.
Yeah.
And that consistency starts to create this natural proclivity of perseverance rather than it being something you have to rally in yourself. It's just something you're like, no, this is who I am. Trusting in grace, living under it, but also pursuing him with perseverance.
Yeah.
And we talked about perseverance is not about perfection. In fact, perseverance is about you do fall, you do fail. It does not work out. That's why you get back up. You keep trying, you move forward. Not because you're trying to earn something, but because you believe the gift of life that you've received has more for you. There's full life waiting. And so after we talked about consistency, then we talked about just the idea of persistence. And persistence is the thought, when you've done it consistently, when you've pushed through those barriers, but then you're tired.
Yeah.
And maybe the reward hasn't come as fast as you thought it would. And you've been consistently trying, and maybe even things aren't working out like you wanted them to. And now what are you going to do? And so we talked about being persistently attached to the church and to Jesus, and how those are in those moments you cannot do this alone. And so that's part of what James talks about, is like encouraging one another, lifting one another up. Like, do not, like, he is pushing unity almost over everything in that book, where he's like, stop fighting with each other, like support each other, quit bickering between one another. You need each other. And he's going like, we're already getting persecuted by the people that don't, like, we don't have energy to fight each other and to figure this out. And I feel like the church still struggles with that if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And so persistently pushing towards peace, using perseverance as the tool, migrating that direction.
I feel like another way to talk about that is like, where do we apply persistence? It's okay if I have a trait called strength, but where do I apply that strength? Do I apply it to help others? Do I apply it to only help myself against others? Do I whatever?
Yeah.
And so learning about persistence and like the need for it, the need to have grit and be ready to just like do hard things. But then where do you apply that?
Yep.
Okay, you can apply that at the gym and it'll help a lot and you'll get healthier.
Yeah.
But you can also apply that to very soft, non-inherently gritty seeming traits and skills and stuff like that, like prayer. I'm going to pray to God because of my persistence that I'm holding on to, and I'm going to apply it to this. I'm going to pray to God for X amount of minutes and beyond X emotions or feelings. I'm going to pray to God even when I feel bored, because I know that the living God is on the other side of it.
Absolutely.
Rather than like, I give up or I'm discouraged in the faith because I don't feel God.
Oh yeah,
etc.
Timothy Keller had a great illustration that he used talking about one of his first Bible classes, and the professor did this thing that stuck with him. And I didn't mention it at the camp, but I was thinking of it now. You were talking about it, but he had I forget what section of scripture it was, and he just had the students write down observations. You remember this? And they started to write down observations and greater and greater insights as they were. And so he had to do it for like 45 minutes in this class. Just look at this and write down what you did. And at the end of the class, he had everybody raise their hand and say what thing had they observed that they thought was the greatest impact. And they wrote them all down. And then he asked them the like polarizing question. It was like, how many of you found that thing within the first 5 minutes? No hands. And I was like, how many of you found this thing in the first 20 minutes? And there was like 2 hands. And then I was like, how many people found the thing in like the last 5 to 10 minutes? And it was like 90% of the class was like, yeah. And he's like, the Bible is this way. Like, you have to push and allow yourself to sit with it, marinate in it for long enough. And that's that persistence you're talking about. And I also think leveraging that not only personally, but like you mentioned, for the benefit of others. There are times that giving of yourself, sacrificially giving when there is no benefit for you.
You know what persistence sounds like? It sounds like long suffering.
Yeah.
A word that you love.
I do. I hate that.
A word you don't love to do, but that you'd love to bring back.
I do. I think there is, one of the things that just popped up on my feed is one of the guys that I did that Tough Mudder with put up a photo and was just like, mud tough, us tougher. And like, and I was like, oh,
ouch, fire hot.
I was like, oh my god.
Don't let him ever find me.
And, but that long suffering of 5-6 hours of doing something incredibly difficult, like this hike that we did, where the reward is not until the very, very end. Like when you get back to the van and you get in the van and you go, we did it. And we took a before and after photo. I haven't seen them yet, so like did the happy one and then like the one afterwards. And I am very interested to see if the smiles are different at the beginning and the after. But
so long suffering is one of the fruit of the Spirit. It's translated from the original word in some other language, but sometimes it gets translated as perseverance, persistence, and endurance, and whatever. But long suffering is like,
or forbearance, even.
Anyway, it's like, I am going to, for your sake and with you, suffer for a long time.
Yep. And a lot of times when you think about the fruits of the Spirit, most of them They take a sacrifice for the giver to help the person that they're giving to. Kindness often is even that can be overlooking small offenses to make peace. Patience can be overlooking the inconvenience of the moment to create peace for the other person. You know, a lot of the things, self-control is the same thing, putting my needs aside to help the needs of others be met first. And so I do think perseverance, though it almost helps all of them. Like it's like you could attach it to all of those and be like, it's really hard. It's easy to be patient the first time. It's really hard the 10th time.
Yeah.
And we've mentioned it on here. Real patience doesn't begin until your patience ends. That's when patience actually begins. So like a lot of this stuff is kindness is actually when your kindness runs out. That's when like kindness really starts.
That you have like natural levels of all those things. And then there's the character trait. I'm going to choose this even though I don't feel like it anymore.
And that's why I love that first James 1:2-4 is because that's how you grow. Like trusting that that's the place that growth is occurring is so healthy that if you can learn to recognize that this is actually a chance for me to grow. I was sitting with somebody yesterday that just had a deep wound that someone had said. And they were wondering how to handle it, and they didn't. They literally said, "Do I have to talk to them anymore?" And I was like, "Ooh." And one of the first things I said is, "They're not your enemy." And he was like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "They're not your enemy. Like, you have to get that out of them, and you have to start to recognize that the offense is from them, but who they are is still a child of God. Like who they are, God still loves. Now, what they did, you can be mad at that, but you need to pull that out of them, and you just set it over here. And you need to recognize that their immaturity does not excuse your lack of maturity. So their immaturity does not give you the right to act immaturity, like against them. So like, don't just see that as a chance for them to like see what they need to grow. Like see this as a chance for you to grow, to respond in a way, to act in a way, to do in such a way that like this is actually a chance for you to grow. And for them, it was like a big like I don't like that answer because like they're like I just tell them to stop doing the dumb things, and I'm like I mean I feel like Jesus did that a lot, like and so I think with persistence or with perseverance or in this maturing process, a lot of times we want to make it about the thing we're overcoming or the thing that we're doing, when really God is actually just leveraging that to work in us, to actually mold who we are internally. And so perseverance, it's through a task, but its work is really inside of us in what it's creating and what it's changing.
So you of course used your health and workout journey as some examples of some of this kind of stuff, and you've talked. I'm sure you did on the episode that we did about that. Yeah, about how going to the gym every day and creating this consistent routine and consistently pushing heavy weights and doing stuff like that and challenging yourself. Not only did it grow your muscles so they could handle more weight, but it grew your character and personality. It grew your tolerance for hard things. Yep. So that like, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but something along the lines of like, so when I get home and the kid's having a meltdown, that's not the hardest thing I dealt with today. Nope. All of a sudden, in context, it's way easier.
We talked about, I just went to lunch with Jacob. Shout out, buddy, if you ever watch this. But he and I started working out a year ago yesterday. Yeah. And so we went to lunch today, kind of celebrated, and we're like, yay. And one of the things that we talked about was we went from getting home from work and saying, I'll get the trash, and saying, hey, why haven't you taken care of this? Or kids, golly, you're so much of a bother. And then at the end of the day, feeling just like lazy, tired, and just like a failure, to leaving the gym, taking the trash out, cooking dinner, helping clean, playing with the kids in the yard, and going to bed feeling like the day was won. Yeah. And how all of that stuff, it's not necessarily just because I lifted weights. It's that I just changed one part of my life that started to stimulate that. And what's funny is when I ran into the guy at the gym, that's what he said. Yeah. He said, not 3 plates, 1, right? And I was like, yeah, Not 3 plates, one. And because with gym guys, they know that nobody can walk in and bench 315 pounds, which is 3 plates with a normal bar.
Yep.
Unless they started at 1 plate. And they did that consistently enough to when they can do 2 plates. And then they did that consistently enough till they finally, hopefully, can get to 3. But somehow in every area of our life, we think we just can throw 3 plates on there and just be like, yeah.
I teach music, and so many people are like, I thought I'd be really great at this instrument by week 4. And I'm like, no, you can probably barely play anything by week 4.
I was like, can you get a chord?
Yeah.
Well, I remember learning an instrument, and each hand, especially like guitar, each hand is its own fight. Like, I could learn all these chord shapes, and I'm like, wow, none of the rhythms came to my right hand.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I can do all this. Where's this hand? Like, why is this hand not doing what I want it to do?
Yeah.
So I totally, and we talked about that too, the 10,000 hour thing, which I know, I was glad you had heard of that before. Most musicians have, because that's like, it's a really, and that's just the idea that if you spend 10,000 hours doing a specific skill or whatever, most of the time that's around the level of mastery. And so 10,000 hour rule. And I talked about a couple examples of that where Beethoven was writing since he was like 6 years old, full symphonies and all this stuff. So when he wrote da 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 da, they assume it's right around the 10,000 hour mark. So, and then when Jordan hit his shot in the 1983 national championship, they assume that's around 10,000 hours of basketball that he had played, and that's before he played the Bulls, before he won 6 championships, before all that. You know, everybody sees those. Everybody sees those games and they're like, "Wow, he's the greatest player," and it's like, but they don't see him taking 10,000 shots before that. So. Yeah, and in our kids camp that's coming up, I can just tell you, as this room if you're watching on YouTube, this room has been transformed multiple times today.
You've been just looking at this corner.
Yep.
If you're on Spotify or one of the audio ones, you've been looking at nothing, or maybe the road as you're driving or whatever. Yep. But we get to film in a room that used to be Trevor's office, and we just film in the corner.
Yep.
And the rest of the room is something else.
It's used for testimonies, and then also a giant green screen, which I think went back in time with a dinosaur or something today. So I just say, to say that our kids camp is the same thing. We have one of our vision statements here that is, we invest in the next generation because their impact will be greater than our own. And what we mean by invest is not just money. Yeah. It is intentional teaching and time and experiences. And the team that has been working since January, if not earlier, to put meals, schedules, activities, and then skits, scripts, lessons. And it is all around the idea that when that kid comes to camp, they are going to be entertained on a level that meets them. They're going to have experiences they're going to go home and tell, but then they're also going to have interactive lessons that help them learn and grow and move through things. I love the theme of the camp this year, this idea that the fruits of the Spirit takes other people to live out. Like, you can't live out the fruits of the Spirit without other people. You can't be kind if there's no one to be kind to. You can't have joy if there's no one to share it with. And so, I love teaching kids that they need each other, and that part of growing in Christ is growing with one another. And that just a theme of taking a team of people that are in a really hectic, crazy situation and teaching them how to bond and grow together to get out and to make it, and then translating that to, hey, this is what the church is like. It's such a cool concept. And to have a team of people that are not just doing this as a job, but doing this, I think, dedicated, excited. I feel very honored a lot of times because of how hard this team works to make this stuff happen. And we're not fighting for attention. You guys aren't fighting for approval. This is just wholehearted, silly fun. When I walk in here, I never know what I'm going to see and how it's going to go. And I mean, dinosaurs on puppet hands and crazy costumes and dance videos.
This is the camp we do. This is our other camp, not high school camp. And it's K through 8th grade. This is the camp we do that is pretty scheduled and whatever. But it's because a lot of kids this age, elementary school and even through junior high, they get a lot of value and formation, who they are, out of play. And also the relationship stuff that we were talking about with high school camp. So no matter who you are at this camp as a kid, you are in a small group and you're in a cabin with them and you're with the same leaders the whole time. So you build up that thing and then you go to church with them later. So it's the same benefits we were talking about with high school camp. but it is so much fun.
It is a ton of energy and a ton of time, and it is so cool to watch people willingly give vacation time and energy outside of their normal routines. And then on top of that, everyone in our staff plays a role in trying to make this pull off. It's not just although we have a great youth team, you and Sharon pull in your pieces. You're helping John with video stuff. You're acting in the scenes and creating silly stuff.
Yeah.
We have elders that are involved in this. We have youth that are involved in this.
We've had an elder. Should I say this? Yeah, I'm going to say it. We've had an elder shirtless in a luchador costume wrestle somebody on stage.
Yes. As a surprise last year.
As a surprise.
And his own daughter was like, Dad?
It was hilarious. It was a great way to end that skit that taught him a valuable lesson.
Yep.
This year, I'm going to be a videographer in the skit, like on a wilderness adventure thing back in time.
That has tons of allergies, which is hilarious.
And my name's Nelson Nervy. I'm using the Sid the Sloth voice from Ice Age. And I'm allergic to everything. It's part of my real testimony I'm bringing in.
Well, we say all this, and I'm glad if you stuck around for this long. If you ever have questions about our camp, talk to our youth team, talk to Ryan and I. They are not phoned in. They are not done the easiest way just because we know we have to have a camp. The kids can go to camp.
No, this is a project of love.
It absolutely is.
And I'm really proud of it.
It's a real project of love, and it's meant to provide lifelong memories.
Yeah.
And hopefully to plant seeds that these kids will want to be a part and participate and be a part of a camp down the road that they can host. I know that's Katrina and I, like some of our favorite memories where our first kiss was at a camp when we were not only attending there, but then leading together. And it's some of my favorite. And I know that's why it's close to her heart. And it's close to my heart. And so watching these things be pulled off year after year with more and more time, you guys are trying to outdo each other every year, I feel like.
Outdo ourselves.
And AI now is helping you be able to create whatever you want in just these skits, which is wild. But hey, thanks so much for listening. You persevered. I'm proud of you.
You made it through. You suffered long. You bared for.
Make sure if you have any questions or if you want to let us know, and maybe if even after the camp experience, or if you want to be a part of the camp. I know we still have some help that needs in the kitchen, as well as the day camp, and then counselors that maybe you're listening to this and you didn't realize that's what you were participating in. This Camp Wakanda is only 15 minutes away from the church.
Yeah, 15, 20.
It's a YMCA camp. It's right towards Hall Town, if you know where that is in Mount Vernon. It's outside Mount Vernon. We'd love for you to be a part of it if you want to. And there's multiple ways to do that. And again,
it's the best.
Thank you if you're a part of Kingsway for providing the financial support, but also the volunteer support. It's an amazing thing to be a part of, and I feel very humbled, like I said earlier, to be a part of a church that is investing in the next generation, not just with their lips, but with every part of their body, and that includes their hands and their feet and their wallets, which we really do appreciate. So, as always, thanks, Mom, for listening. And
thanks, Zach.
Yeah. Brett Jones said thank you the other day. It was the first shout out. So you know what? You're welcome, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
Have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you later.
See ya.